there's so much that we don't know. And I know that we have been saying a version of that for many, many weeks. But I would just like to remind people that the word that people, supporting Trump were putting out yesterday was fanning the flames of reports that the grand jury was out for a month. So I think there's a lot of twists to take on this. He is now going to go through the process of getting arrested. And I think that that is going to be much more jarring for him than I think people realize. I've been told that he's been briefed on what that will look like. It will involve fingerprinting. It's going to be unlike, a normal arraignment because he's going to have Secret Service, and this is going to look different. This is somebody who has spent more than 4 decades trying to avoid being arrested or being indicted. And so this is a really scary moment for him, despite whatever he says. Now, you talk to different people tonight, you hear he's fine. You talk to others who say that he's very angry. I expect that we will be hearing all of those emotions going in various ways for the coming days. I don't know what the fallout is going to be politically, and I think this is the first time that I can think of where he can't control this. He was able to control impeachment in some way because Mitch McConnell was on his side in the Senate trial and because House Republicans were on his side. He was even able to control the second impeachment to some extent. With the Mueller report and the investigation, he was never going to get indicted as a sitting president. And I think that he has an overconfidence in his ability to impact events by intimidation tactics, by pushing out headlines. This is now in the hands of whatever judge he draws and what the voters think.
There's so many potential ripple effects on public perception, voter perception. It's impossible to kind of game it out many steps in advance.
It is, in part because he's such an agent of uncertainty, right? I mean, if you think about the fact that we had a week of a news cycle that he created by saying he was going to get arrested on Tuesday, which literally no one was saying in the news media. And he created that, and then when that
He also fundraised off it.
And he fundraised off it, and then when that day came and went, he said, look, it's all falling apart, it didn't happen. So I don't know how he's going to handle this. I do notice that, he did not reiterate his call for protests. I thought that was pretty striking. I did notice that Elise Stefanik, a very close ally of his, put out a statement saying that people should organize peacefully. And everyone is trying to stress that around him because there are still these echoes of January 6, 2021.
Yeah, and I think it's also something we should note, we were talking about earlier, that we've both heard from people, is that they genuinely had an idea that this may be falling apart, that it may not actually be happening. This is from Trump's attorneys. Now, there are a lot of attorneys around him. At the moment, he's hearing from a lot of different voices, but that is why they were so caught off guard by how quickly this transpired today.
Yeah, they believed the grand jury was not coming back. They believed that this was not going to happen for a month. And then others of them, not all of them, but others of them did believe that the case was falling apart primarily on the word of Bob Costello, a Giuliani lawyer, and briefly a Michael Cohen, either lawyer or legal advisor, depending on who you believe, who came in as a defense witness in the grand jury in New York, that you have the right to do that. There was no evidence that they ever offered as to why they believed that, just things that people were hearing. And as I said, Trump likes to create headlines that he thinks influence events. That obviously did not happen here. And if anything, frankly, all the stories yesterday about how the grand jury was going to be off for a month probably alleviated a pressure valve for Bragg. It sort of, it took the heat down a little bit.
I want to bring in David Urban and Van Jones. David, this is a remarkable historic night. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on what happens now.
Yeah, so, Anderson, I was just thinking back 20 years ago when I was chief of staff of the United States Senate, and you had the impeachment of Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton, was impeached and was acquitted, similar to President Trump, and then remained in office. And there, Ken Starr went away, and Special Prosecutor Robert Ray was still lingering around. And there was the threat of Clinton being indicted when he left office, right? That was always kind of out there. And the day before he left, on January 19th, 2001, former Special Prosecutor Robert Ray cut a deal with then President Clinton to not prosecute him, right? And to let him surrender his law license for 5 years, pay a fine, and put it aside. And there was a great deal of pressure on Ray to indict him at the time, and he didn't. And he said, the American people and history will judge me and judge whether I did the right thing or not. And in retrospect, I think Robert Ray did the right thing, and I'm not so sure history will be so kind in this case to Alvin Bragg.
Van Jones, what do you think?
Well, I think that Democrats and progressives are swinging back and forth between being very, very worried and very, very relieved. On the one hand, this case it's hanging on a novel theory. It's not the insurrection, it's not the coup, it's not the election interference, it's a hush money payment. There's worry that this is maybe not the bridge to try to die on. At the same time, I think a lot of people are saying, finally, something has happened to get some kind of accountability here. You've had our social norms run into the ground. You've had our political norms run into the ground. At least our legal norms are not being run into the ground in this case. You have a prosecutor who went to everyday ordinary Americans and said, here's what I've got. Do you think it's chargeable? And they said yes. And I think that there is a sense among some people that somebody had to do something at some point, and that everybody's just kind of standing on the edge of the swimming pool looking in, all these prosecutors, all these cases, and nothing has happened yet. And so on the one hand, I think people are concerned and they're worried and they hope that this doesn't set some precedent where presidents start just getting prosecuted. There's real concern, but there is a sense that finally some kind of accountability may land on the doorstep of Donald Trump.
John Miller, it's going to be interesting when we were able to look back and know exactly what happened in that grand jury room over the last several weeks, because clearly the last witness that was supportive of the former president, or at least critical of Michael Cohen, seemed to affect the course of the grand jury in some way.
I mean, when you talk to people in the district attorney's office who have been following the plan of the grand jury presentation, they expected to get that indictment back on Monday, I think the 13th of March.
2 Mondays ago.
Right, putting Bob Costello in as a witness in place of Donald Trump, who they invited to testify on his own behalf and declined. Seemed to be something that they planned to do and then put it to the vote of the grand jury. I think we don't know what effect Costello's testimony had on the grand jurors. That is something that's only in their minds. But we know the effect it had on the prosecutors, which is they thought he did damage to their case. They didn't want him to be the last thing grand jurors heard before they went to a vote. And the people I've been talking to said, they went into days of strategy to say, what do we need to put in front of this grand jury to repair that, and sow doubt into what Costello said?